it's sold to promote scale in the Northwest. And what we do is we work with clubs that want to put on scale contests, and we teach them how to put on scale contests. And we supply just about everything you need to get started until the club gets to the point where they can take over all the functions and take care of everything themselves. We have a menu that we go by that if NorthWest Scale Modelers, nicknamed NorthWest SAM, provides a certain function for the contest, we retain a certain percentage of the total gate. If the club supplies like all the judges and the scorekeepers and preps the field and so forth, they get a percentage of the gate for those jobs and so forth. And the idea is to get to the club to the point where they do all the work, they get all the money. We've got one club in Redmond, but we've been mentoring, we started mentoring quite a long time ago, and they've been on their own for about the last 5 or 6 years, and they net on that weekend almost $2 grand. In the bank, all clear, it's all theirs. They supply everything. And a lot of the money they get is from the raffles for these big events. And the raffles alone could bring in $1,500, $2,000 just in raffle prizes. But they also make money on food. They make sure there's a food vendor of some sort at these contests for the contestants. We've got 35, 40, 50 people in these things. They make money on fees for camping there at the field. They make money on the registration, of course, and so forth. And once they get to the point where they can handle it themselves, whatever money they make goes into their bank. None of it goes to NorthWest SAM. But until then, we help them out. We show them how to do it, how to run it, so forth. We supply bodies if necessary until they get theirs up to date. Hopefully someday we can do that. We can have a big contest like that. And so getting into the contest, for those of you who are interested in a scale contest, and there's several categories you can fly in. There's the beginner categories and the pro-am categories. Pro-am, sportsman, advanced, unlimited, and so forth. Those kind of categories for documentation, all you need to do is show a photograph of an airplane that's just like the one that you're entering. If you're entering a Mustang, you show them a picture of a Mustang. If yours is polished silver and this one is camouflage, doesn't matter, it's a Mustang. 5-point documentation, you're good to go. Doesn't matter what it is. Basically, what I'm going to talk about tonight is the higher end categories. Your pro-am unlimited, your team scale, your expert scale, and for those contests that are big enough, the designer scale. Now those contests or those categories, your static score is about half of your entire score for the whole contest. And unfortunately, that doesn't change. If you get a crappy flight, you can always make up for it with the next good flight. Your static is presented once, and it's once and done. So the idea is to put together a documentation package for that airplane that is going to cover everything that the static judges need to judge your airplane, to compare it to the full-scale airplane that you're representing. There are several ways to do that. I'm going to pass around 2 different documentation books on that. This one here is from a friend of mine who unfortunately passed last month. And he wanted me to take his airplane. So I did. And this is a Proctor Jenny. And this is the documentation package he put together. And in the back are the static scores from the last contest he entered. So you can see what the judges look for and what kind of comments they make on their judging forms. And everybody does their documentation book differently. For Scott, he started off with a bunch of 3 reviews because the Jenny had 4 or 5 different variations, and he highlighted on each of these 3 views what variations to look for in his airplane. Then he's got some photographs of the airplane in a museum with all the markings and coloring and so forth, and some details and stuff that he'd like the judges to look at, and so forth. So you can take a look at that one.
What kind of qualifications do the judges have? Or are they certified?
They get certified. Northwest SAM has a judging program that they go through to be certified to be able to static judge and flight judge, one or the other or both.
Okay.
The qualifications are based on US Scale Masters qualifications. We've adopted those for static and flight judge. AMA flight judges they have their own separate qualifications and test. I don't think it's that much different than what we use. Their rules and stuff may be worded differently. It's pretty much the same. This other documentation book here is the one that I put together for my airplane, a Church Midwing, a 1930s racer. And that's me with the plane. And I do mine differently than him. I start off with a front sheet that gives specs for the full scale airplane and the model and so forth. And then I go through different things. I got my 3 views here, indicate what the judge will look for. Color and markings. In this particular instance, this plane, there was only one of the kind in existence. It's hanging in the EAA museum. It was put together by Gene Chase, the president of the EAA, from parts all over the country. That particular plane used to be available as a kit in the 30s. Well, there's not many parts left, but he was able to scrounge one up. And after he got it built, he invited Jim Church, the guy that designed it. He was 80-some years old at the time, to take it up for a flight. Pretty cool. So anyway, part of the documentation, the most important thing to do is gather your 3 views before you build your airplane. A lot of guys build a plane, they get it all nice and pretty and painted and so forth. Great mark and so forth. Man, this is good enough to enter in a contest. Well, then they go looking for the 3 views for documentation, and they find out the airplane they built is so far off from accurate 3 views that they're stuck. What are they going to do? They're going to tear the plane apart and rebuild parts of it? So the most important thing is get your 3 views first and build your plane around that. And even if you have a kit, you can take those 3 views, measure things, compare it to the plans on the kit, and find out where the differences are and redraw the differences on the plans and recut parts as necessary to fit the shape or the size of the 3 views. And then when the judge looks at the 3 views and said, does the outline match? And looks at the plane, yep, the outline matches. Because you got your tail outline matches the 3 views, the wingtip outlines, so forth. And that's probably the most important thing you can do before you start is get your documentation package first. Get your 3 views. The most important thing is the 3 views. The next step to back up that is photographs. And on those sheets that I passed out, there's one of them called Scale Model Research or something like that. It changed names over the years. They used to be called Scale Model Research. I'm not sure what it is now. But it's on there. And that site there, you can get 3 views. You can still get photograph packs of various planes. And I got this pack here for glass here, because that's one of the ones I'm gonna build someday. And they range anywhere from 5 or 6 pictures to 40 or 50 pictures, depending on which photographer sells the negatives to that company and so forth. And the one thing you want to back up your 3 views with is good quality photographs, because the photographs will trump a drawing any day. So you want to gather that, and you're allowed, and on the reference sheets, there's links to the NorthWest SAM site, and you can download their competition guide. And there's a link for the AMA website, and you can get the competition guide for the AMA too. And they each have a listing of what is allowed in a documentation package and how many pages you can have and so forth. So use that as a guide when you're putting things together. So you get your 3 views, 1 or 2 pages. Photographs, 3 or 4 pages, depending on how big the things are. Color swatches. Now, the important thing about color swatches is that you cannot make your own. And that's a drag. Because you take your paint, and you can't just take a 3x5 card and slap paint on it and say, well, here's the color I used. You have to document that color. And most of the time you have to use an FSN number, which is federal standard number for colors. And I haven't been able to find it yet. I know it's out there. There's a website you go to, and you can purchase 3x5 cards with official colors on there. And on the back, it has the FSN number and whatever kind of nomenclature number goes with it, so forth. And that's your documentation for that, for colors. So a lot of guys say, well, I used for my Cub, it's Cub yellow. So I went and bought a spray can of Cub yellow. And then I just sprayed a 3x5 card and said, here's my Cub yellow, because that's what it says on the can. Well, unless the can has the FSN number on there, that's not an official Cub yellow color. It could be, as far as we know, the official yellow. But you've got to backtrack, and you've got to have a paper trail to document your colors and make sure they're accurate to what you're using. So part of your documentation is your sources besides 3 views, like this. You get this here is a pack of 3 views I got years ago. And these are for golden age airplanes. There is a Stinson Voyager, Traveler, et cetera, a Monocoop. So you would throw one of these in your pack as your documentation for your 3 views. But you'd also make sure this matches your plans that you're building from too. So you can take this and you make copies of it, so you don't screw up one good copy, and then match everything, the outlines to this, to your plans and so forth. You can take this and blow it up in a copier up to about 400% or something like that, to match whatever size you need for your plans, cut it out, lay it on there, trace out the new outline and so forth. Other things you can use is there's lots of books out there. I've got a bunch of books for a mosquito. This one here happens to have markings for the colors for the different markings and so forth. You got colors on the inside, Um, you're probably all familiar with the squadron signal books, series of books. They've got a couple hundred of them. They've got 3 views in here. And most famously, they've got the centerfold. There's lots of color schemes to choose from.
I don't know how many couples I drew.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's got 1 or 2 airplanes or favorites. They've got a squadron book stuck somewhere that I'm gonna build it someday. And then there's the miniature versions of it. One of the sites that I mentioned on there was Hip Pocket Aerodrome. And you can download versions of this series of books too. They've got almost every one of these available too. And these are great sources for your documentation. Good color scheme here. I built this one about, I don't know, 10 years ago. So I got documentation of that. And another source, if you're building like me, I love anything from the 1920 and older. The great magazine called World War I Aero. And that's all they do is cover airplanes from about 1924 and earlier. And this particular issue I grabbed here, just grabbing them, has an albatross biplane that I drew up for my final project when I went to ITT Tech, and then built this thing a couple years later. But here's excellent 3 views for everything you need for that plane. So there's all sorts of sources for your documentation. It depends on how detailed you want to get, how much time you want to put into it. Personally, when I pick out a new project and I'm building it from scratch and I build my own plans, I usually do research that takes about a year before I start. If I gather everything I can find on that particular airplane. When I started building my de Havilland Rapide that I brought the fuselage in a while ago, I was able to track down maintenance manuals for the airplane, pilot's instruction manuals. And I contacted a father and a son in England who restored one over a course of 27 years and have gotten probably over 100 photographs of their airplane that they sent me to use as documentation to build details and stuff on mine. So if you want to go whole hog on a scale airplane, there's tons of information out there. And luckily nowadays you got the internet. So 95% of the stuff you can find on the internet, but you got to search. You got to be diligent in what you search for. And you've got to not rely on one source. Because one guy's 3 views could be taken directly from the airplane or from factory drawings. And the next guy could be based on a photograph he took and he's trying to scale it up and draw 3 views from it. Every 3 view is different in one way or another. Little nitpicky things. Panel lines could be off. The outline of the canopy could be off a little bit. Outline of the tail feathers, the wing tips and so forth could be off. It just depends on how accurate that guy that drew the 3 views did his research. And in turn, you've got to do your research too to find out what's the best. And if you find a set of 3 views that matches your plans closest, stick with that, modify the plans if necessary, then you're good to go. There is probably more airplanes out there than you can ever think of that you could build, and not just Cubs And of course, there's Incestus and Mustangs. Like the one I did at Church Midway. When I went to the Nationals, the Scale Masters Nationals in Fresno, there was another guy there that was building one at home. He's the only other guy I know of in the country that built one. I don't know why. It's a gorgeous looking airplane in the air. The outline is just cute as hell. But not many guys do it. And the Albatross Taub biplane that I built, I went to a Scale Masters Regional in Malala shortly after I built mine, and I walked up and there was another one. And he built his from the same 3Ds I built mine from. So both our airplanes were the same. And they were rare. I've never seen another one like it anywhere, because it's a very rare airplane. Most Taubes are single wing airplanes, but this one was a biplane version. But anyway, the stuff is out there. And it's not hard to put together a documentation package. 3 views, photographs, reliable color chips, you're good to go. And like on Scott's Jenny, I think he consistently got in the 95s, 96s with static points. And that's only because when I would ding him, when I was judging the craftsmanship portion of it, you got three static judges. You got outline, where he looks at the 3 views and checks the outline of the plane. Then you got color and markings, and he looks at photographs and other pages you have to point out markings and so forth. Then you got craftsmanship. A craftsmanship judge can be 4 feet away, and he looks at how well you built the plane. He doesn't worry about color and markings. That's the other judge's thing. He looks for things like finish, how big your nuts and bolts are. Are they be too big? Most of them are.
Yeah.
Do you have servo horns stuck out of the side of the fuselage to your elevators? Wrong, 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 wrong. Stuff like that, using model control horns instead of scale control horns, stuff like that. I would ding him on his Jenny for things that he would never fix. He said, "No, I'm good. I'll eat a couple of points on that."
I'm just not gonna mess with it.
Because I would have to tear that plane half apart to replace the parts that I found that were wrong. That he got lazy in the first place building it. But you can get unlazy and build it right the first time and walk away with 98, 99, 100 points easy. It's not that hard. If you can get 95 points static, you can put an extra hour or two in and get those another 2 or 3 points on whatever it is that you're getting lazy on. It's not that hard. It just depends on how frustrated you get near the end of the project. Is this close enough, or do I want to do another 4 or 5 weeks on it? Nah, it's close enough. I'll eat 5 points. And everybody's that way. When I'm judging stuff, I find stuff that says, no, substitute this for that, and there's a half a point. But sometimes they get to the stages. I'm done. I'm done working on this thing. Because there's a saying with scale models, they're scale models never finished. You're just done working on them. At that point, you're just done. So there's lots there to look at.
Cool.
I was talking to Dave Hagelgans, or texting him a couple weeks ago when I first mentioned I was going to do this. He said, "Well, most of the guys in the club are flying phony arcs and stuff." I said, "They're not going to last 10 minutes for a flight." I said, "Yeah, they can." We've got guys that show up with 120-inch IMAC airplanes. Electrics. With battery packs. And they're flying full IMAC maneuvers in that thing and got 50% battery when they get done. It's a matter of managing your throttle when you're out there. You don't have to fly balls to the wall the whole time. You fly in a scale manner. You can get a 10 maneuver flight in and have battery left over, even with the smaller foamies. So he said, why don't you come up with something that doesn't take 10 minutes? I said, yeah, we can do that. We can come up with 5 or 6 maneuvers, that's it. We're up there maybe 7, 8 minutes. Now, normally we use 10 maneuvers for a flight, and that's what I'll go over next month, putting together a flight routine. And probably nothing in December.
That's fine.
Yeah.
No, because we'll have our Christmas party
Yeah.
in December.
And then in January, I can go over how, after you get your flight routine, how you present it to the judges when you're flying.
Cool.
Which is just as important as having a good routine, how you present to the judges when you're ready to fly.
So hold my beer and watch this isn't the normal routine. So hold my beer and watch this is not the normal routine.
There are some guys I've known over the years that do that. Usually after the day's competition is over, they'll say, yeah, hold my beer and watch this. They try to do night flying or stuff like that.
Ever seen a cloud bike inverted?
There's a friend of mine that had an Acrostar, which is a kit that was put out by Airtronics a long time ago, back in the 70s, early 80s. Gorgeous sport biplane. And he'd fly it inverted 6 inches off the deck all the time. And one day he just got stupid. And the next thing you know, the top wing was shredded off. And then another 100 feet down there, the tail was shredded off, all inverted. Just a big stream of balsa, about 300 feet. And at the very end was the engine, way out there. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But luckily, he was just doing with a sport plane, but not anything else. But anyway.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thanks.
Yeah, I look forward to the next two. We'll make sure we get those on the website, and like I said, we recorded this one. I'll edit this one a little bit, and then we'll post this on the Facebook page, and I'll email a link out to everybody so they can.
If you get copies of those two pages there.
I'll make copies of those of PDFs and put them in the in the media section so they can connect to them as well. Awesome.
Can you do this from a kit?
You can do it from a kit, a scratch build, anything you want. Now, the AMA came out with a new builder of the model rule a couple of years ago that we adopted Northwest SAM last year for the 51% thing. They say you can take an ARF, not a foamy ARF, a built-up ARF like the ones Dave Hagelgans flies, completely strip the covering off, recover it, and repaint it. It's your airplane now, it's not an ARF. Well, but you can't take a foamy and spray paint it flat primer and repaint it. That's not the same thing, that's not gonna fly.
So much for using the P39.
So you can take a kit that somebody built, like say a Sig Riot STA kit, so forth. And you can strip it, repaint it. Now it's your airplane. You can enter it in advanced, team, and expert as you were built by you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the rules on that, the more entry level, the amateur, level of, don't they have like I said, the one where it's like, well, your airplane kind of looks like this airplane.
Yeah. And that can be any
And that's,
airplane.
that's
That
a
could be a
good entry level.
only
to
ARF,
get
that can be
people
a
in.
built-up ARF, that can be a kit.
Yeah, so I can enter my top flight P39 into the Pro-Am with a 3-view or with a photograph of a P39 and say, see, they're the same plane. And That's
Doesn't
documentation
even
for
have to
Pro-Am,
match color
but
scheme.
that's my documents for
Yeah.
Pro-Am.
And it used to be when we first started with the program categories, you had to show up with here's a picture. Now you can show your phone.
Yeah.
Picture on the phone, yeah, you're good, 5 points, like that.
So if I find documentation and I repaint it as that pink racer, I can go to the next level.
If you want to.
There was a P-39 and it raced in Reno that was pink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pink. Cause I was looking for a new paint scheme for that one, just because it'd be fun, turn it into a Reno racer.
Sure.
And I was looking it up and that was one that was all pink. I thought that'd be fun to do, Delaney can paint my airplane pink.
Yeah.
So. Anyways, very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So if you got any questions about any of this levels, you can text me or email me and I'll get right back to you.
Awesome. And your contact information will be on that PDF.
It works.
All right.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You be around the phone today, maybe you can be out of town.
Well, this one flight I won't be, I've got a funeral going. I'll be at funeral Wednesday or the 18th.
Yeah.
Ever been